president spent much of his time ahead of the midterms stoking fears of migrants and asylum seekers, tweeting repeatedly about this caravan from Central America, calling it an invasion, invoking it in rallies from Florida to Montana.
An invasion. And today, the president moved to block some asylum seekers from the country by proclamation. He issued an order stating, quote, "The entry of any alien between the United States and Mexico is hereby suspended and limited, exempting anyone who, quote, enters the United States at a port of entry and properly presents for inspection." Until now, a person could claim asylum regardless of their immigration status.
Right. It's two different things. Remember, immigration and asylum are two different things. You could have been in the country for any reason and claimed asylum. Basically, this is saying that you've got to go to a border point or an entry point into the United States in order to do that.
And this is the massive problem that the president thinks we should fear.
Yeah. It's just not. We have a lot of other problems in this country.
In the last 2 weeks,
But that's...
synagogue shooting, 11 people. A bar in California, 12 people. Someone tried to shoot up a black church, and instead they shot 2 people at a Kroger.
Pipe
and
bombs.
someone was sending pipe bombs.
But let's talk about what this is.
You can be afraid of those things.
Let's talk about this this order that the president has put into place. Joining us now is NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams. Pete, good to see you. The new restrictions take effect just after midnight tonight.
1 minute after midnight,
What's
right.
the practical effect of this?
The practical effect is that anybody who, from that point on, tries to claim asylum, if they cross into the border illegally, they don't come through a regular port of entry, they won't be able to make that asylum claim. They'll be apprehended, detained, and immediately sent back. So the argument here is that the president has the authority to do this under broad authority that he has under federal law to restrict immigration. And what the government claims here is that it's intended to reduce this so-called catch and release problem where people claim asylum, they're given a date, they are released, and they never show up for their asylum hearings. That's the government's argument here, that number one, most people who claim asylum don't come back to follow through, and those who do come back, most of them are denied asylum. So they say the asylum process is being abused. Now, there are obviously going to be legal challenges here, and there are a couple of things to consider. First of all, there is a separate provision in federal law that says anyone should be able to claim asylum no matter what their legal status. In other words, whether they came in at a border of entry point or not. And secondly, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees says the United States has a treaty obligation to respect and consider asylum claims no matter where they're made inside the country, and they claim basically that this new policy violates the treaty. So I think it's easy to say that you're going to see legal challenges. ACLU has already said they believe this is illegal. The government says they believe they have the power and that they'll assert the same authority that ultimately, in a changed form, did succeed on the travel ban in the Supreme Court.
Right. That's
How does this impact the caravan? The caravan coming from Central America. Is their plan to enter the country illegally or go to a point of entry?
Well, I'm sure that there are as many plans among the caravan people as there are people, but what this means is that if they want to claim asylum, they're going to have to come through the port of entry. Now, of course, the port of entry points are often, there's a terrible backlog. The government does say that they're going to surge additional resources to these ports of entry, but there's still going to be a backlog, there's still going to be a line. And what the government has said in the past is, and by the way, under previous administrations too, that I'm sorry, we can't handle you all, come back tomorrow or come back the next day. And of course, those people have no place to stay, so that is a problem. But clearly, the intention here is to try to send the message that you can't just sneak into the country and get asylum. You're going to have to come through the border checkpoints, and the whole point of here is to try to deter immigration. Illegal or illegal.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.